I mean, after all, I'm a simple man. All I need in horror is fog, a cemetery, and a castle, and I'm satisfied. Alright, gather round, creeps. I'm about to tell you a tale of 5 films. 5 films that may be known and liked by some of us weirdos, but they never actually receive the attention they deserve. So, in no particular order, let's start with number 5 on the list, and I'm talking about none other than Cemetery Man from 1994. This is a film that I never hear talked about enough, and I have no idea why because it is such a fun watch. Cemetery Man follows Francesco Della Morte, who is the caretaker of a cemetery in a small town called Buffalora. Della Morte lives in a small shack in the graveyard with his assistant Nagi. Della Morte and Nagi, unbeknownst to the town, must kill newly deceased who rise from their graves as violent zombies 7 days after their deaths. Cemetery Man is a comedy horror that you can tell took some influence from movies like Evil Dead and Reanimator, but overall it does its own thing as it really doubles down on Della Morte's inner turmoil and his inner anguish, sometimes veering into absolute insanity and what the fuck territory. The movie is chock full of atmosphere and it is beautifully shot and is highly rewatchable. It appeals to a wide demographic as it is comedy horror with good gore and a great score. If you like zombies, gore, and cemetery sex like I do, then you are going to absolutely love Cemetery Man. The next movie is not only highly underrated, but it is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Coming in at number 4 is The House of the Devil from 2009, written and directed by Ty West, who most everyone knows from his X, Pearl, and Maxine trilogy. House of the Devil, though, is still my favorite film from him. The story is a tired and overused horror trope of a struggling college student in 1983 who takes a babysitting gig to help her pay for her first apartment. Upon arriving at the home of her clients, she begins to realize things aren't what they seem. But even though the story is old, Ty West tells it so damn well here. With the right amount of twists, turns, and scares to make the story interesting, it proves that you can take an old story and breathe new life into it. The acting here is great, and you can tell that Ty West really takes the time and makes you care about the characters and makes them relatable, so it's hard to see the events in the film unravel. House of the Devil mimics the overall look and feel of a film from the 1980s masterfully, and it still to this day is one of my favorite looking horror films of the last 20 years. This is one of those cozy comfort movies for me, and I turn it on when I just need something to watch. It just feels good to me, and I believe that this movie, if it would have actually been made in the 1980s, it would be held as one of the greatest horror films ever made, up there with John Carpenter's Halloween. It's highly rewatchable and doesn't suffer from the same issues other horror films from that time period did. I'm talking about you, sorority bro. I highly recommend this film to everyone that hasn't seen it, and I'm still waiting to see if Ty West can impress me more than he did with this one. Alright, so I have a question for you. What does a severed head, a cheeseburger, and a supermarket have in common? You don't know? Well, I'll tell you. It's number 3 on our list, and I'm talking about Intruder from 1989. Intruder is another one of those films I found for the first time while just randomly scrolling for hours before just giving up and choosing it at random. I saw it for the first time probably 5 years ago, and I didn't realize how meaningless my life was until I saw the story of an overnight stock crew of a small town supermarket who find themselves being stalked and slashed by a mysterious maniac. Directed by Scott Spiegel and written by Lawrence Bender and Scott Spiegel, Intruder is nonstop fun and highly relatable as young adults are working a dead-end job in a grocery store that they just realized is being sold off and likely closed down. Intruder is much more than just a slasher. It's a good lesson in why you shouldn't trust your boss. The film offers some twists and turns in an attempt to keep you guessing on who the killer actually is, as the employees search the store for the killer as they are each brutally murdered one by one. The acting is decent, and we get a surprising appearance from Sam and Ted Raimi as supporting characters in the movie, and you also get a guest appearance from the Crimson Chin himself, Bruce Campbell. When watching this movie, you can tell that they had a lot of fun making it, as it never takes itself too seriously, but it also doesn't feel as campy and corny as the name would imply. The movie was reportedly filmed in 2 weeks, and some of the scenes make that obvious, but overall, the movie just feels good, and it actually looks really good too. The climax of the story is a little funny, but it does fit in with the overall story, and during that time, horror movies most definitely didn't focus on realism at all, so it gets a pass in that category. It may also hold the horror movie record for the most times a killer has used a severed head to bludgeon someone to death, and the record for how many times someone is stabbed and hit without dying. The number 2 film on this list is another one I can't shut the hell up about, and it is Fade to Black from 1980. This may be the weirdest of all the films on the list, but it is an underrated gem. I love everything about this movie, from its weird main character, Eric Binford, to its weird-ass plot. Eric Binford is a shy and awkward film buff who embarks on a killing spree, murdering those who tease and betray him, all while stalking a woman who looks like Marilyn Monroe. Written and directed by Vernon Zimmerman, this film is the perfect example of a sociopathic serial killer done right. Fade to Black doesn't necessarily rely on scares or gore to entertain. It's more of a character study of Binford as he slowly loses his grip on reality and descends into madness, letting movies take over his entire life. Shit, why do they gotta call me out like that? And that's one of the coolest things about the film, is when Binford kills his victims, he dresses up as classic Hollywood characters, from Dracula, the Mummy, to Hopalong Cassidy, and eventually a mobster. Fade to Black is chock full of classic horror movie clips as an expression of Binford's emotions, and I think that's a nice touch. You weren't really seeing people do this type of thing around that time period. Although Binford is weird and creepy and he says a lot of weird shit, you find yourself rooting for him as he slays those that wronged him. Admittedly, the first half of the movie is the better and more entertaining part of the film, but if you make it into the third act, into the climax, the ending pays off with Zimmerman making the right decisions at the end of the film. This is one of my favorite underrated horror movie classics, and somehow it comes up in almost all horror movie conversations that I have. Even though Fade to Black was released in 1980, I think it was ahead of its time, and honestly, surprised it hasn't seen a remake yet. So if you hang out during any of the channel live streams or know me personally, then you probably know I love old Universal monster films. Black and white horror films from the 50s and 60s, one of my favorite being the number 1 film on this list. And that is Black Sunday, aka The Mask of Satan from 1960. Directed by Mario Bava, Black Sunday is a masterclass in beautiful gothic imagery on film. The film tells the story of Princess Asa Vaja, who was executed for being a witch and a vampire. Princess Vaja is resurrected when 2 travelers accidentally disturb her abandoned tomb, setting her on a path of revenge against the descendants of those that sentenced her to death centuries beforehand. Full of atmospheric chills, Bava stylishly tells an old witch story and tells it better than most can. It's the only black and white film on this list. Bava's expert use of light and shadows in this film really draws me in and honestly just makes me want to go and shoot everything in black and white. The set designs and set pieces are sick and reminiscent of Nosferatu and Dracula. These old horror classics really excel in this area, and I could look at their sets all day long. I mean, after all, I'm a simple man. All I need in horror is fog, a cemetery, and a castle, and I'm satisfied. The acting overall is good, with Barbara Steele giving a standout performance as Vaja and securing her as the horror queen of the 1960s. Like a lot of films from this era, the story is a bit slow in parts, as it really tries to rely on atmosphere and dread. But sometimes that's okay because it allows you to take it in, because like I said, the film is just beautiful overall and one of my favorite horror classics of all time. And if you haven't seen it, you need to go watch it and bask in its monochromatic goodness. And that's it. So those are 5 of my horror recommendations that I think are highly underrated, ones that you don't hear about enough. I tried to pick some of my favorites from different time periods to give you guys vastly different choices. I watch horror movies on a daily basis, and I'm always coming across what I consider hidden gems and underrated films. So this is just volume 1 of this video series, so keep an eye out for future videos in this series. So don't forget to let me know how many of these films you've seen down in the comments, and let me know what your favorite underrated horror film is as well. Also, don't forget to check the description for cool ways to help support the Cinema Creep channel. Last but not least, don't be a chud and like the video if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more killer content from the Cinema Creep channel. And that's it. Stay creepy, and I'll see you on the next one. See ya.